Welcome to another edition of Common Algebra. This video goes with section 4 of chapter 10, building the unit circle. Now you have to know the unit circle. You have to be able to write it on the test. And I don't want you to memorize it. I want you to know how to build it. So in this video, we're going to go through the patterns. And I want you to know these patterns so that on the test you can, like I said, build it from your memory. So a few things you have to know, and you already do know a lot of these. You have to know that we're starting here, the initial side is the positive x, so this is 0 degrees. And you know that halfway around the circle, you know that this is 180 degrees. You know that straight up is 90, and you know that straight down here is 270. So if we're to fill them in from here, let's just work on this top part first. If you cut 90 in half, this is 45 degrees. Adding 45 to 90 would make this 135. And why don't I simply do the 45s first, kind of finishing that pattern. So 180 plus 45 gives us 225 here. We already have 270. 270 plus 45 is 315. All right, so now we have all the 45s done. So let's go back and do the 30s and the 60s. Okay. We're taking this whole top part, this 180, and we're cutting it into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. So 180 divided by 6 leaves 30 degrees here, plus another 30 is 60. Another 30 brings me to 90. Another 30 brings me to 120. 120 and 30, 150. 150 and 30 is 180, which lines up. 180 plus 30 is 210. 210 plus 30 is 240. Plus 30 is 270. Plus 30 is 300. Plus 30 is 330. Plus 30 brings me right back to 360. So now I'm done with the degrees part. Perhaps the next logical one to do is the radians. You do have to have something memorized from radians. You can choose, if you know from 0 all the way around to 180 is pi radians. All the way around the circle to get back to the 360 is 2 pi radians. If you know that, you can build from there. So this top half of the circle is pi. If I cut it in half to make the 90, I'm at pi over 2. If I cut it into fourths to hit on these 45s, so if I had pi, I cut it into fourths, that means that 45 is pi over 4. So now I just start counting using that pattern. This is 0. This is 1 pi over 4. Now I'll write this, but some of you can reduce as you go and some can't. So I'm going to write it without reducing. Once again, the pattern. Here's 1 pi over 4. Straight up here would be 2 pi over 4, which does reduce to pi over 2, and we have that. So 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4. This 135 is 3 pi over 4. And the 180 is 4 pi over 4, which fits the pattern. We already know that that's pi. So going in the lower half and continuing the pattern. This was 4 pi over 4. So now I'm here at the 225. This is 5 pi over 4. Down here at 270, and you can reduce this later. but I'm just going to stay in the pattern. 6 pi over 4. Here at the 315, I'm at 7 pi over 4. And when I wrap back up here, I have 8 pi over 4, which does reduce to my 2 pi. I always check that to make sure I have stayed in the pattern correctly. So now let's go back and let's do the 30s and the 60s. So again, this whole entire top half is pi. We're taking the pi and we're cutting it into, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. So if you're cutting the pi into 6 pieces, this 30° would be pi over 6. So this is 1 pi over 6. The 60 would be 2 pi over 6, and we will reduce these later. The 90 is 3 pi over 6, which we've already reduced. The 120 is 4 pi over 6. The 150 is 5 pi over 6. And the 180 would be 6 pi over 6, which does reduce to pi, so I always like to check that and make sure I hit the pattern correctly. So we were at 6 pi over 6. So we come down here to the 210. We're at 7 pi over 6, 8 pi over 6. Straight down, we're at 9 pi over 6. 300 is 10 pi over 6, 11 pi over 6, and back up here, 12 pi over 6 does reduce to 2 pi. So now what we really should do is go back and reduce these. So coming out from the origin, remember this is the unit circle, so we're coming out 1. So this point would be labeled 1, 0. The other quadrant angles, the 180 over here would be -1, 0. The 90 would be 0, 1. And the 270 down here would be 0, -1. So those hopefully are the easy ones to start with. Now we got to label these other endpoints. And the way we find these is to look at the special triangles. Draw in the perpendicular. We know our reference angle is 30. We know we're in the unit circle, so the hypotenuse is 1. So now let's label the sides of the triangle. The short leg is half the hypotenuse, so this would be 1/2. The long leg is the short leg times the square root of 3, so this would be square root of 3 over 2. Now these are the x and y coordinates. This is, we're coming over x, which is square root of 3 over 2. We're coming up y, which is 1/2. Therefore, this coordinate is square root of 3 over 2, 1/2. Now I'm going to jump up here to the 60° angle because logically it would be next. And get rid of some of this so I can draw in this new reference triangle. And all that has changed now I have this reference angle of 60. Now the short leg of the triangle has become the x coordinate, the long leg has become the y coordinate. So when I can label them, again, unit circle, 1. This time the short leg is 1/2, and the long leg is the square root of 3 over 2. So I go over 1/2 and up square root of 3 over 2, so that is the xy coordinate of this location. All that really happened is that the long leg and short leg switched their x and y's. Now we don't have to draw all the reference triangles, but I'm going to do them here in the first quadrant just to show you what we have. So now let's do the 45° to find this location. Drop in the perpendicular. Again, we're on the unit circle. This is 1. Dividing by square root 2 and rationalizing. This leg is square root 2 over 2. as is this leg. We're in the first quadrant, so they're both positive. So this location on the graph is square root 2 over 2 for the x and for the y. So now we've labeled this endpoint, this one, and this one, and the 90. So now what happens is these special triangles just repeat themselves over and over. You don't need to draw them all in, but you certainly can. All that happens is we have these same endpoints repeating themselves in different quadrants. And in quadrant 1, both x and y are positive. In quadrant 2, the x is negative and the y is positive. So we just need to figure out if the long leg or short leg is the x and the y, and if they're positive or negative. So in this one, the short leg is negative 1/2. The long leg is positive, square root 3 over 2. So this location is minus 1/2, comma, square root 3 over 2. Moving on to the 45 reference angle. Again, the x is negative. So I have negative square root 2 over 2 for the x and positive square root 2 over 2 for the y. This one, it may help to look at the triangle. This time, the long leg is the x, the short leg is the y. So the long leg is square root 3 over 2, and it's negative in second quadrant, and the y 1/2 is positive. All right, this pattern continues into the third quadrant. In the third quadrant where they're both negative. So this location becomes negative square root 3 over 2 for the x, negative 1/2 for the y. The 45 in the third quadrant, both square root 2 over 2 are negative for the x and the y. And down here for the reference angle of 60, the x is negative 1/2 and the y is negative square root 3 over 2. In quadrant 4, the x is positive and the y is negative. So this one would become 1/2. The x would be positive. The square root 3 over 2 for the y is negative. Here for the 45 reference angle, the x square root 2 over 2 is positive, the y negative. And for this location, the long leg square root 3 over 2 is positive, the short leg, the 1/2, is negative. And practice filling these in. We got to get to know these patterns. We'll have lots of practice with this in class. I'll be giving you blank unit circles and asking you to fill them in preparation for the first page of your test. All right, thanks. Have fun with the unit circle.